In today's podcast, we'll read you a famous poem called If by Rudyard Kipling. We'll explain the vocabulary and philosophize on what the poem might mean. Welcome to this cultural episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with more than 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. So Craig, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, my friend. I've had a very good, interesting week with 3 lovely groups of people in my conversation courses at different levels. And we're having a lot of fun speaking English and focusing on fluency. And if anybody listening is interested in the next course, it does start in about 2 weeks. Send me an email to Craig, Craig, @inglespodcast.com, and I'll give you more details and how you can join us. That is my shameless advertisement and plug for my conversation courses. But how are you, Reza?
I'm doing fine. I can't complain. Not bad. And as you know, we've just had a nice cup of coffee with one of your biscuits, which has pepped me up a bit. I'm full of energy. I'm ready to go, ready to record.
You are rosy-cheeked and ready to podcast. First this week, we have a voice message from George from Venezuela, who at the moment is living in Germany, I think. Let's check.
Hi Reza, hi Craig. My name is George from Venezuela. I've been listening to your podcast since 2019 and I want to share a short anecdote with you because the first time that I sent a message to you, 2 weeks after I moved to Chile, and right now sending this second message, I'm close to move to Germany. I don't want to leave without saying thank you. Please keep going forward in what you have been doing with this English podcast. You are helping a lot of people. And I want to suggest a topic for a podcast. What about poems? Do you like poems? There are some short, useful, and good poems like If in the voice of the British actor Michael Caine, poem like Invictus. So that's it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, George. I think, I did make a mistake. You're in Chile at the moment, but I think you are moving to Germany soon. So best of luck with that transition. You're certainly moving from country to country, and I hope every move has been successful and Germany will be even more successful for you. Any comments on the message, Reza?
Thanks very much, George. Your message was easy to understand. And yes, it's a good idea to talk about poetry. That's why, in fact, we already have spoken about poetry. Quite a while ago, in episode 201, we spoke about poetry and poetic devices in general. So if you look, there's a link in the show notes here to inglespodcast.com/ then the number of the episode, 201. You'll find the episode there about general poetry and poetic devices. But you know what, George? We're going to take your advice and we're going to talk specifically about the poem If. That's a good idea. We're going to concentrate on that one poem in this episode.
Yes, because you mentioned to me before we started recording that you have a special attachment to the poem If, something connected to your parents. Is that right?
Yes, it was Craig who heard your message first, George, and told me about this idea. And it happens by chance that I do have quite a connection with If. My parents actually gave me a present for my 18th birthday Very relevant that it was my 18th. Supposedly, if you're a boy, that's when you become a man, or if you're a girl, you become a woman at 18. So they give me a really nice print to stick up on the wall of the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. That was my birthday present. It was their way of saying, okay, let's see if you're a man now. So I do have a special affinity with this poem.
And I like it very much too. So we'll look at it and let's say dissect it, look at it piece by piece in a second. I just want to say, George, I noticed a couple of things from your message, pronunciation points. When you said the word if, I think you put a t sound at the end of it. It sounded a bit like if. Be careful of that. It's just if. And your SH sound, when you said share, you gave it a bit too much air because it sounded a bit like chair, which is something you sit on. So make sure you differentiate, make a difference with those sounds. It's share. So, a suggestion, Reza, let's read the poem in its entirety, which means read all of it first, and then perhaps we can break it down, which means separate it into verses, verse by verse, look at some vocabulary, and then finally we'll read it again from beginning to end. Does that sound good?
Good idea.
So this is If by Rudyard Kipling, written in 1895. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build up with worn-out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings, and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your long turn after they are gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So that's the poem. Let's look at some vocabulary before we break it down and look at it in detail.
Yes, so the word knaves is a word which I imagine very few of you know who are listening. It's not a common word these days, except perhaps used in a comic way in modern English. Let me spell it for you. It's with a silent K at the beginning, K-N-A-V-E-S. So that's the plural, knaves. And a knave is a dishonest or unscrupulous man, a bad person. It used to be a commonly used word, but I think nowadays, Craig, in modern English, we would just use it when we're being a little bit, when we're being lighthearted and funny. Like we might say to a child, "Oh, you little knave, you." You know, we're not really angry. We're just a little bit angry. But in more old-fashioned English, from 100 years ago, more or less, when this poem was written, it was a common word to describe dishonest or unscrupulous people.
That's right. And remember, this poem seems like modern English, and most of it is, but it was written in 1895. So there are a couple of words here that are not so common these days. The next word is not really common, but it is used a lot, especially in medicine. It's sinew, S-I-N-E-W, which is a bit of tough, fibrous tissue which connects muscle to bone, kind of like a tendon. So if you are a carnivore and you eat meat and you eat a piece of steak, you might have some sinew which is hard to chew because that's what's connecting the muscle to the bone in an animal. And of course, we also have sinews in our body.
Our next word to explain to you is perhaps a bit more common than the others, but it's possible that you haven't heard it. It's the word heap. H-E-A-P. And a heap can be an untidy collection of objects placed haphazardly, that means without any real organization, haphazardly on top of each other. Or it could simply mean a large amount or number of something. For example, quite often you hear it in modern English used very colloquially to say, "Oh, he won the lottery, he has a heap of money." So this person hasn't literally put the money in a big physical pile, but you can imagine that they did because they have so much. So it can simply mean a large amount, or it can mean the physical pile, the big collection of something placed haphazardly without organization.
If you are parents and you have teenagers in your house, you might go into their bedroom and you might find a heap of clothes on the floor. Some teenagers, not all, but some teenagers just assume that somebody is going to come and pick up their clothes and wash them. So if you are the person in your family who does the washing, who washes the clothes, then you probably would go and find a heap of clothes and then you would stoop to pick them up. So to stoop is also in the poem, S-T-O-O-P, and that means you're bending your head and your body forwards and downwards so that you are picking up something. And some people who have maybe back problems might stoop as they walk. So they would permanently have that posture where the head and the shoulders are bent or inclined forwards, to stoop.
Yes, you've got me thinking now about my dear old granny, my grandmother, rest in peace, who had very bad osteoporosis. So older people or younger people with osteoporosis, trouble with their bones, often end up stooping all the time. Her head was always bent over.
Yeah, it's
Must have
sad.
been very painful for her.
Yeah.
Our next expression is pitch and toss. It all goes together. So pitch, then hyphen. That means one of those little lines which you find in the middle of a word. Pitch, hyphen, and hyphen, toss. Pitch and toss. It's a traditional game, a gambling game, where players throw coins towards a mark. So there's some kind of mark in the ground and they throw the coin there. And usually the winner, I think, is the person who's closest to the mark. Is that right, Craig?
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's pitch and toss. So you get the coin, you throw it, and the one closest to the mark wins. Pitch and toss.
Yeah, you might have heard the verb to toss a coin, the expression to toss a coin, to throw it in the air at the start of a football match, for example, heads or tails, who goes first, to toss a coin or to flip a coin. And another word we have, remember you can see this vocabulary and the poem at inglespodcast.com/537. Our last word is virtue, V-I-R-T-U-E, which is a way a person behaves and it shows high moral standards, a quality that's considered to be morally good and very desirable in a person. It's a really good thing. And it includes things like honesty, being honest, and kindness, a kind person, and integrity. So virtue is the noun, that's the quality in your personality, and the adjective is virtuous, a virtuous person.
My mum used to always say to me a very common line which parents say when I was being too noisy. She'd say, silence is a virtue, young man.
Yep, my mum said that too.
Silence is a virtue. So that's a thing which was a slightly poetic way for your parent or some other person to say to you, shut up.
Yeah.
Be quiet. Silence is a virtue. In other words, you'd be a better person if you didn't make so much noise.
My dad used to say, little boys should be seen and not heard.
That's very old-fashioned.
That was his expression, yeah, when I was too noisy. So those words you may or may not have known, they appear in the poem. Let's go back to the first verse. We'll read it again and then have a look at maybe what it means. So the first verse was, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs, that's their head, and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. What do you think that means?
So, well, I'm pretty sure it's not about decapitation.
Losing your head.
No one's being decapitated, right?
No, not even in 1980, when was it? 1894 when it was written.
The expression to lose your head has an idiomatic meaning. It means to go crazy, to become depressed, to become desperate, to be unable to think anymore. You've lost your head. So if you can keep your head, that means to stay calm, rational, be able to think. If you can do that when other people can't do that because they're losing their heads, that's a good thing, according to Rudyard Kipling. And I'm sure most people would agree. Also, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, when other people don't trust you. So trust and doubt are kind of the opposite. You can either trust something or you can doubt it. So if you can do that, trust yourself, even though other people don't trust you, they doubt you. But it says, make allowance for their doubting. So doubting, ing, can be the noun. So you trust yourself. You know you're right, even though some people say you're wrong. But you don't say, well, I'm 100% right. You know, maybe I'm not 100% right. Maybe I'm partly wrong. If you can do that, Rudyard Kipling saying, you're a good person if you can do that. Trust yourself, but don't be oversure of yourself. Be prepared for the idea that you might be wrong. I like that idea.
Me too. It's like having self-confidence as well and not being overconfident, but also showing empathy to another person. And relaxing, just chill out, man. Just relax, take it easy, stay calm. Yeah.
Craig, what do you think of the second verse? I'll just read it to remind people. Let's hear your interpretation of it. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet, don't look too good, nor talk too wise. How would you put that into your own words?
Well, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, that's being patient, isn't it? So have a lot of patience. And about lying, don't be dishonest. Don't be dishonest. Tell the truth. Don't be hateful to other people. Don't be arrogant as well. And finally, don't look too good nor talk too wise. Don't boast. Have humility and just be a humble person. Do you agree with that?
Yep, that's exactly my interpretation too.
Okay, moving on to verse 3. If you can dream and not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. What do you think?
I really like this verse.
Buddhism, isn't it? It reminds me of Buddhism.
Kind of Buddhism, yeah. It really gets you thinking. It's very thought-provoking, this one.
Yeah.
So if you can dream, that's good. I think Kipling's saying it's good to dream, but not make dreams your master. By master there, I think he means that they don't control your whole life. In other words, yes, it's good to dream sometimes, but you shouldn't have your head in the clouds, as we say. That means you're always dreaming all the time. Yeah, it's good to dream, but not all the time. It shouldn't be just one big dream. Your life needs a purpose as well, practical things. Also, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, it's good to think. You should think about things, but don't just think about things. Your aim should be doing things, I think he's trying to say. It's good to think about how you do things, but then do them. Don't just spend all day thinking or dreaming. And I particularly like the next bit when he says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. I like that a lot. That's really thought-provoking. Imposters. I think what he's trying to say here is, don't worry too much about triumph and disaster. They're passing things. They're ephemeral. The important thing is that you are happy in your own skin, that you've got a purpose in life, but you're prepared to dream and think about things as well. Sometimes you'll be successful, triumph. Sometimes you won't, disaster. But don't be put off by those things. Don't be swayed. Don't be sent in the wrong direction. They're passing things. They're not that important. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think that's particularly relevant and applicable to anyone listening thinking of taking an English exam. Because maybe you're going to pass. Yeah, fantastic. Maybe you're going to fail and be disappointed. Oh, well. But don't go too much one way or too much the other way and put too much value or disappointment if you don't get it, or be too happy and over the moon and ecstatic if you do pass it. Just because really, as Reza said, both are temporary feelings and experiences. So just don't worry about passing or failing too much.
Here's the next verse. Let's see what you think about this, Craig. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves, to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. The first two lines, I think, don't worry if your words may be misused, if you say something and people might misinterpret or misunderstand what you're saying. And that's the line, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. So don't worry if your efforts have been destroyed, just keep going. And that's reinforced in the next two lines, watch the things you gave your life to broken. So stoop or go down, pick them up and start again. So rebuild from scratch, which means rebuild or restart from the beginning. So if you've achieved something, you've made something, and a disaster happens, or you need to take a step back, there's some inconvenience, don't worry, just pick yourself up and start again.
Those first two lines, if you can bear to hear the truth you spoke and twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, was he really ahead of his time? Did Rudyard Kipling imagine in a dream the arrival of Twitter or X? It might be that.
Could be. Or social media in general, let's say. Yeah, with misinformation. Could be. So we move on to the next verse, which reads like this. If you can make one heap, remember that word heap? Heap of clothes. If you can make one heap of all your winnings, all your money, and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. What do you think?
I think he's saying by make one heap of all your winnings and risk it. He's saying be prepared to take big risks. In fact, be prepared to risk absolutely everything, all your winnings, the whole heap.
And maybe lose it.
And you might lose it on one pitch and toss, like throw a coin in, you might win, you might lose 50-50. I think he's saying that there are times when you've got to be prepared to do that. And you might lose. Start again at your beginnings. Back to scratch, your beginnings. For me, the most important bit's the last line. And never breathe a word about your loss. Not only can this terrible thing happen to you, but don't make a big deal about it. Don't go around saying, oh, poor me. Oh, my life's so difficult. I've suffered. No, just pick yourself up. Start again. Don't breathe a word about your loss. Yeah? Just
don't complain.
Get on with life.
No complaining. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Craig, what do you think about the next verse? If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on.
Well, to me, the first line there, force your heart and your nerve and your sinew, is pushing your body, making an effort. So pushing forward, keep going, even after they're gone. So even when you're exhausted, you have no more energy, you just want to stop or rest, just keep going, keep on, push on, and hold on when there's nothing in you. So keep going further. Except the will which says to them, hold on. So that will is willpower. Use willpower to push yourself through and make sure you achieve your goals. Would you go along with that?
Yes, you said, I'm not sure if you mentioned or not, physically, yes, but also mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the sinew, I think he's referring to, physical pain.
And your heart will be mental.
And nerve as well. I guess your heart perhaps emotional and your nerve mental. So both emotional and mental and physical difficulty. There'll be times when you think you just can't go on, but you have to.
Exactly. So we have 2 more verses to go. The next verse begins, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. Perhaps we should explain the word foes there. We didn't describe that, did we?
That's true. Perhaps we should have earlier. Yes, it's not such a common word.
No.
A foe, it's perhaps a slightly old-fashioned word, but it is still used in modern English. It means basically enemy. Your foes are your enemies. In fact, getting off the point a little bit, but it's interesting. The word foe, F-O-E, actually gives us the word foreign in English.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes, the word foreign comes from the word foe, but the E is dropped. So foe is F-O-E, and in foreign it's F-O, and the E disappears, R-E-I-G-N. The foe reign, the kingdom of the enemy. So it's very telling that in the English language, a foreigner is
your enemy.
An enemy kingdom. An enemy kingdom. That's where the word foreign comes from.
Interesting. That's so interesting.
It tells you a lot about British mentality, doesn't it?
And very apt, let's say, according to today's politics. Very reflective of today's politics.
So, what does it mean? Well, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue or walk with kings. In other words, Kipling appreciates a person who can be comfortable in any situation. Actually, you've got a way of saying this in Spanish, which I really like. You say simply, sabe estar. Yes, a person who knows how to be in any situation, be it with a king or the crowds. Yeah. So even if you're with the kings, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't get above yourself. Don't think you're anything that you aren't. Yeah. Don't lose the common touch. Yeah. Also, if you're with the crowd, some crazy, not very disciplined crowd, that doesn't mean that you have to lose your virtue. No, you are you. You're not the crowd. So I think he's saying there, be yourself in whatever situation. Don't lose it. If neither foes, enemies, nor friends can hurt you, so it's a good thing if you are not too affected by what either enemies or friends do, because perhaps in a way you could say that it's friends who can most damage you. You expect an enemy, a foe, to hurt you, but when it comes from a friend, wow, that really hurts. So Kipling's saying be prepared for that as well. If you can do that, that's a good thing. And I particularly like the line, it's very thoughtful, count with you, if all men can count with you, but none too much. For me, that means it's good that everybody knows that they can rely on you to count on someone, rely on you. If you say something, you're going to do it. They can depend on you. They might ask you for advice, that type of thing. But none too much. That's an interesting bit. My interpretation, Craig, is by that he means that, but don't do favors for anybody or don't make concessions for people who don't deserve it. That's my interpretation of that. So yeah, it's good that people think, oh, go to Craig. Craig's a great man. He'll help me out. I can count on him. But not, let's go to Craig because I shouldn't be able to do this. But Craig has a friend who can fix me in there and jump the queue and do something illegal. That's the bit you should avoid. That's my interpretation of that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with almost everything you said. I think also I'd add with the last line, if all men count with you, but none too much. I interpret that also as being, don't let other people destabilize you. Meaning, yes, help your friends, be there for your friends, but think twice before you do favors that might affect you and your family, for example. So always bear in mind that you have your moral standards. Don't go too far. Always be careful that you are operating within your comfort zone as far as doing favors and helping people is concerned.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's included as well there. Okay, there's just one more line
final verse.
Sorry, just one more verse, not line to read. So it's in the final verse where, apart from all the conditions, we can't help but be English teachers. When we see the word if, Craig and I probably think, oh, a conditional sentence. We're so used to teaching conditional sentences. For example, if I won the lottery, I would buy a big house. So if is the condition, I would buy a big house. Then there's the result. So here comes finally the result or the consequence of all these conditions.
There's been lots of ifs, hasn't there?
There's been a lot of conditions, yeah? A lot of conditions.
Lots of ifs.
There's one more. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So in the final two lines, we get the consequence of all these conditions. If you can fulfill, that means you meet the requirements of all these conditions, all these ifs. If you can do that, then you're a man, my son.
Or a woman.
Or a woman. Let's remember it was written in 1895 by a man. It was a much more sexist world then. I interpret it to mean man or woman. You're an adult now. You're a man or a woman. So, wow, that's where it all comes to a head. How do you interpret these words?
Well, I would say make the most of every moment. Take advantage of the time you have. Don't waste your time. Make sure that you use it to the best of your ability. Feel the unforgiving minute. It's unforgiving because it goes quickly. It disappears. So make use of every 60 seconds of your life and appreciate the moment and what you have. And if you do that, then yours is the earth and you'll be happy. So give everything your best effort and eventually you'll be successful and mature and a man or a woman. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the most important message is that if you can do all these things which have been mentioned in all the previous verses, then you're a man. And if not, you're not much of a man or a woman. Yeah, this is what an ideal man would be like. And not many people can all the time say that they fulfill these conditions. In other words, not easy being a man, brackets, or a woman, modern times.
That's
Not
right.
easy. You've
Not
got to
easy.
fulfill all these conditions to consider yourself one.
Okay, so maybe, Reza, let's read it one more time to get the full effect now that we've explained the meaning of the verses. I'm sure George will appreciate one more reading.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Very well read, Reza. Very enjoyable.
Well, it's a poem that I hadn't seen in a long time, but I've known it for a long time. As I said, I became acquainted with it first on my 18th birthday, so it means a lot to me. Is it a poem that you've known for a long time?
Yes, I think we probably studied it in school. It's very familiar to me, but like you, I hadn't revisited it and reread it for many, many years. So thank you very much, George. And let us know if you enjoyed this podcast, because we're very happy to look at other poems that have a significance and that mean a lot with some very profound meanings. We'll do this again if you enjoyed it.
Craig, trying to make the poem relevant to our times even more, can you think of any man or woman, living, or it could be someone from the past, who fulfills all these criteria, the conditions in the poem? If you can't, maybe someone who comes close. Can you think of anybody at all?
Ooh, that's you've put me on the spot there. That's a very good question. Maybe not in modern times, but going back a few years, the first person who comes to mind is Mahatma Gandhi in India, who was a very virtuous man, leading non-violent resistance against British occupation of India, and of course, eventually managing to achieve independence from Britain. So that's the first person that comes to mind, Mahatma Gandhi. What about you?
Yes, he certainly springs to mind for me as well. Him, maybe Nelson Mandela as well.
Oh, yes, of course.
Because think of what he had to put up with, including, was it 20 or 30 years or something like that in prison, just for protesting about unjust laws. He certainly kept his virtue.
In fact, he's very connected to that second poem that George mentioned, Invictus, that also appeared in the film about Nelson Mandela. Perhaps we can do that in the future if people want us to.
That's a great idea.
Reza, Is there any one of the criteria that you consider more important than the others to qualify someone as let's say, a good man or a good woman?
Well, let's remember there were a lot of criteria or conditions, if you like, to consider yourself a good man or woman. I think they're all really, really important. For me, I wouldn't say any of them is the most important, but perhaps some I particularly value. For example, I love the bit about if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. Those are very wise lines, I think. Not be tired by waiting. Patience is certainly a virtue, as well as silence. People say silence is a virtue. They also say patience is a virtue. And avoiding lies, I think that's very important.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And my favorite line or two lines, not the most important, but the ones I like the most. If you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, I think it's important to remember.
Yeah. It got me thinking that these days, I know it's a bit of a stereotype, but it is true that we talk about, don't be so obsessed with winning or being successful or being powerful. And you mentioned social media earlier. And because social media is so important now, very successful or powerful people get a hell of a lot of media attention these days. I lament the fact, I find it sad that so many people equate as absolutely identical winning, being successful, being powerful as you're a great person. I don't think you necessarily are. I reckon it helps to be a great person, to be successful, powerful, or win, but I reckon there's plenty of people who aren't particularly powerful or haven't won much, and they're great people. So you can be a powerful person, very successful, a role model, but it doesn't mean you fulfill all these criteria, I think. What do you think?
Well, I think it depends how you describe great. What does great mean? And I agree with you that maybe social media is distorting how we look at great people, let's say. But I think I like the quote from Batman that says, "Why do we fall?" What was it? "Why do we fall, Bruce? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up." And I think great people do have that ability, as Kipling says in his poem, to pick themselves up, to push on, to start again. So I really admire people who have physical disabilities, for example. We've just had the Olympic Games and the disabled people competing as well. So people who have gone through a disaster but nevertheless have the character to pick up and continue and become successful, those are the people who I think are truly great.
I couldn't agree more.
But what do you think? Now it's your turn to practice your English. What did you think of the poem? Did it speak to you at all? Did it resonate with you? Let us know. You can send us a voice message. To do that, go to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast, and you'll have 90 seconds to tell us what you think.
If you prefer, you could write an email. Write to craig@inglespodcast.com or belfastresa@gmail.com.
And if you're a Spanish speaker and you would like to study on the website Mansion Inglés, you can study there and also pay for ebooks and audios to help you with your self-study. The address is store.mansioningles.net. We have changed our newsletter, our monthly Cuaderno de Inglés. You can now buy a premium version of that newsletter with lots of extra things and stuff. And for more information, go to the show notes for this episode. That's inglespodcast.com/537 and simply click on the link.
As ever, at the end of each episode, we like to thank all our Patreon supporters. Patreon. The Patreon program is a program in which people donate money. And as a way of saying thank you to those donors, we give them instant access to the audio transcriptions of the podcast. If you're interested, have a look at the link in the show notes. It's patreon.com/Ingles podcast.
Hello, This is Future Craig, which means I recorded this message after I recorded the podcast with Reza, because a few days ago I tried to publish the latest transcription of the podcast for our Patreon supporters, and on Patreon it gave me a kind of a blocked page that I couldn't upload the transcription unless I changed the minimum donation from $1 to $3, which I did. So really this announcement is to say that the minimum amount of money for supporting us on Patreon and receiving our transcriptions every week is now $3. I totally understand if you decide not to continue supporting us, and if you do continue, thank you very, very much. And this is in addition or something separate from Patreon's recent announcement that they will be increasing the charge of people with iPhones who go through the App Store, the Apple App Store, and they're increasing that charge as well. So for the moment, we will be staying with the Patreon system because it's quite complicated to change everything. Obviously, if they continue increasing the minimum amount of money for you guys to support us, then we'll look at other alternatives. That's the announcement. If you have any questions or comments or anything at all and you want to contact me, Craig@inglespodcast is my email address. And unfortunately, we can't mention everybody who is supporting us on Patreon, but we would like to say hello and a very warm welcome to our latest supporters. And they are Guillermina Jover, Arancha, Maribel Rodriguez, Geraldo, Adrià Puig Cabruja, Esther, Carmen de la Torre Palomo, Marina Perez Tricueros, Lily, Marta Busquets, Su Chen, Denise from Greece, hi Denise, Salvador Prieto Villanueva, and Isabel M. Thank you to you and to everybody who is supporting us on Patreon.
What have we got in next week's episode, Craig?
Well, we are taking the rabbit out of the hat next week and surprising you with lots of vocabulary and some idioms connected to hats. So put your hat on for next week's podcast. In the meantime, have a wonderful week. Until next Sunday, it's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell a friend so that more people can listen. And the music this week is by Pitts. As usual, the track is called See You Later.